The Flamingos is a group or flamboyance of friends who love to write and love to critique. The best part is sometimes some of us agree and sometimes we don't, because we all bring our own perspective to a reading or to a question. In this podcast series, we share our perspective on writing through questions we receive at flamingosrightnow@gmail.com. My name is Carl Lee, and I write paranormal fantasy. My current project, Selfies, is under revision for consideration by a publisher. Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Brown. I'm a writer of published and award-winning short stories and flash fiction, and I'm working on a YA fantasy novel. Melanie?
Thanks, Catherine. My name's Melanie McDonald. I'm a retired criminal defense attorney, and I write books about women who kill and the men who drive them to it. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Kendall. I have my first mystery book out, Cat Out of the Bag. That's Cat with a K for Catherine Watson. She's the purse designer, amateur sleuth. Avis?
Hi, I'm Avis Adams, and I write YA novels, historical, speculative, and fantasy. And I have a speculative YA novel with an editor, and I'm awaiting word right now. I also have one book of poetry, Quill Scene, published in 2019. Carl?
So, how do you make your settings real? I love this question. This is a great question. It's also a very hard question. Since I write in our current modern world, but have otherworldly additions, I use places that I know as a template. But it takes more than just getting the street names and the traffic patterns right to make a setting really come alive. Just like your characters' names, their actions in a scene, the setting must be purposeful. Don't just drop your character in any place simply because they have to be somewhere. I write my current book in Seattle. There's a Starbucks on every street corner, and it's perfectly acceptable to have the character go to Starbucks if it drives the scene forward, if it makes the story move. Your setting has to have all of the five senses: sight, smells, sounds. There's a feel to a setting, a tactile feel to a setting. A dusty grain mill is going to feel a lot different than a doctor's office that's very sterile. Likewise, the lobby of a bakery sounds and smells very different than the lobby of a garage or a doorway leading into a milking parlor. Sprinkling these details into your setting adds a dimension to your scene. One last thing, the setting should have objects, but you don't have to mention every object that might be in the scene, only those that are relevant. For example, in the Da Vinci Code, they ignored thousands of priceless, well-known pieces of art and focused on a few known pieces that were significant to the story. As my friend Catherine likes to say, that drives the plot forward. Right, Catherine?
It does, Carl. You're absolutely right. Writers need to pick details that matter. Sights, sounds, and smells ground a reader in the world of your novel. Carl and Melanie, who both develop richly detailed worlds in their novels, have really helped me improve mine. Left to my own devices, my characters would stand in a sterile, empty space, having great conversations, but the reader would be lost. So I've learned to paint a clearer picture. But what do you depict? I had to figure that out since I don't write detail like that instinctively. If you're writing in a setting other than the present day culture you live in, you can't just look around you for inspiration in many cases. So my tip is to research that thoroughly. My YA fantasy is set in a quasi-medieval setting. I didn't want to be too predictable, so I researched medieval history in search of details that I could use to make the setting feel as real as possible. I peppered in some of those details into my scenes. I confess it was a little bit random. So use your research with discretion. For example, I discovered in my research that medieval peasants carried their goods on their backs to town markets to sell, and they paid taxes if they put those on a horse or a cart instead. I loved that detail, and I wrote it right into my novel. To me, that shouted medieval authenticity. Guess what? My esteemed critique group was not impressed. They did not call out that detail specifically as being problematic, but they did tell me that the pace of the scene was too slow. I realized that extraneous detail, among other things, was the culprit. It was an academic point that had nothing to do with anything in the story. My character was just noticing that in the scene for the sake of telling the reader something that I thought was cool about the world. I was patting myself on the back for my research, but the critique showed me the truth. I took the detail back out. In the same scene, I also included a detail about the wattle and daub half-timbered buildings that leaned in, blocking out most of the sky above my character. I got positive feedback on that line. Why did that line work and the other one didn't? Because it was evocative. In just a few words, it painted a picture of that medieval town for someone who had not seen it in person. Also, the description was filtered through the point of view character's senses, and it added to the story by reinforcing her desperation. It developed her character. Other details in the scene that worked well after some refinement included smells that reminded the point of view character of events in her backstory. It brought out those details naturally without bogging the scene down with an info dump, and it engaged the reader through concrete sensory references. I feel certain that Melanie can tell us more about how setting interacts with character in a way that makes the setting real.
Thank you, Catherine. This is a great question. Many of my critique partners have pointed out that I take the description of a setting a bridge too far, but I love setting. Even in a tense scene, a detail like the room was lit by a naked bulb hung from a framed cord can give the reader the feel of the room. It is a shabby room, a room made for murder, a room filled with despair. This specific detail can enrich the story so much. Does it slow down action or dialogue? Maybe. But it also grounds the reader in the depth of hopelessness the room evokes. The perfect telling detail provides depth. To switch for a moment from this single detail to an overall picture, consider what Carl said about how to determine where to set your story. For me, I decide the emotion or theme of the novel and build the setting to reflect or oppose those two things. In the novel I'm writing, the theme is illusion versus the reality of people and or situations. So of course, I set it in Las Vegas, the mecca of glittering illusion and harsh reality. A perfect example of opposition setting is the English country house murder mystery. In a world of gardens and tea, there's a poisonous scone. Amid the roses and daffodils lurks the snake. Love, love, love this stuff. Faulkner once said that he started The Sound and the Fury with a single image in mind and built the novel around it. For him, the setting, the Deep South, was a character in the story. It came alive because he imagined the world from an intimate knowledge of his characters and the impact the setting had on them, how it shaped their lives and their destinies. How did the heat and humidity and illness impact what they ate and what they wore? How did the rural setting make their lives more or less intimate with their neighbors? I need to stop or I'll go on forever. So, what do you want to write about? What is your theme? What do you see when you imagine your story? Fill it with details that further your plot and give richness to your characters. And Catherine, I was totally in favor of the detail about the cart. Wendy, how about you? How do you make your settings real?
Well, a wise man continually reminds me, or is that Carl? Or is Carl a wise guy? Anyway, I get reminded that setting is believed through all five senses. Some sense will dominate, but all play a part. Very interesting when you're writing in the point of view of a character like Selena in the book Be Ready with Bells and Drums by Elizabeth Kata. This book was turned into the fabulous movie A Patch of Blue with Sidney Poitier in the 1960s. Selena is blind, and writing from her point of view and describing setting presents interesting challenges, especially since her loss of this fifth sense is a crucial impact in the plot. At the start of every scene, you need to establish the setting for the reader. It's so jarring in Crit Group when I read a scene and hear from a critic, "I don't know where I am." How annoying. Yes, and for the reader too, if I don't fix it. Elements of setting include culture, geography, time period, and day or time of day. My settings are described through the point of view characters telling the story. I have 2 point of view characters in my mystery Cat Out of the Bag. Catherine Watson, the purse designer, and also Amber, who is the gift shop manager and a college student. They describe settings each from her own perspective, and they focus on what's important to them and how they relate to it. They might focus on what they're familiar with, or they might focus on something that seems out of place to them. How a character talks about a setting can tell a lot about the place and also about the character, especially if in dialogue another character comments about the place with a contrary perspective. I tried something else a little different in Cat Out of the Bag. The murder takes place at the gala party, and there are lots of cell phone pictures and video. That film gets reviewed by Catherine, including her commentary about it. There's an interesting contrast between her opinion of the party setting and what's seen on the film. Be careful not to just dump all the setting description all at once as a scene begins. Give what's needed and let the rest unfold through the scene as the action comes alive in the reader's imagination. A character doesn't realize everything in a setting all at the very first instant. Setting is also a great place to plant clues for a mystery. Pay attention to setting in my book, Cat Out of the Bag, because there are definitely some clues to be found and some suspects that can be eliminated. Avis, how would you describe setting?
Thanks, Wendy. And another great question. Melanie discussed the thorough exploration of the 5 senses. Settings must house your characters, and they must show us what they see, feel, taste, hear, and smell. So making your characters part of the setting helps make your story come alive. And there's a book devoted to active settings that I highly recommend, and it will be on our Facebook page, I'm sure. Pure description of a setting should be avoided. The character must drive the story, as Wendy and everybody has mentioned so far. The character must drive the story. So whatever time period you use as your setting, your POV character is driving the plot and showing us where we are through active setting. We talked earlier about description in your novel and how much is too much, and that question dovetails into this one. Pacing is what dictates the description, but even in a fast-paced scene, your POV character senses are alive. So as Carl mentioned, if your character is in a bakery trying to escape capture, she or he would still smell the maple bars or the burnt crust of the cookie dough that spilled off the sheet, or knock over a pile of pans with a clatter, or burn her or himself on a hot stove. And Catherine talked about researching your setting for historical novels, and I agree with that as well. I've written several Viking novels, and the research I did involved travel to the Scandinavian countries, a boat trip down a fjord, and lots of reading, lots of picture taking too. Setting is more than a room. It is the artifacts and architecture of the times. Are the roads paved? Is it asphalt or cobblestone? Does your character trip over the stones? Is there a sewer system, or are there open pit latrines that need a heavy dose of lime or ashes from the fire to tone down the aroma? Or do they need to dig a new latrine? Are there sirens blaring, or is there the clip-clop of hooves in a compact dirt road? If you've ever read Ready Player One or see the movie, you'll see a futuristic setting that uses all the songs, games, and video devices of the 1980s. It's brilliant, and it is all tied to the POV character because he's a fanatic over the music of that time period, the TV shows, and the games. He moves in a dystopian world where people are relegated to video games for hope and escape. And he provides an exciting journey with lots of reminiscing artifacts from the 80s to assault our senses. Setting can also be a character in the story, as Melanie mentioned earlier. In many of Thomas Hardy's books, the English Moor takes on a life and drives the characters to despair or to joy. In my YA novel, I use a series of monster storms to incite my characters to action, but the POV characters are constantly engaged in interacting with that crazy and wild setting. So bottom line, setting is essential to your story and your novel, but how you handle setting can make or break it. Make it active and show us through your POV characters, and you'll be on the right track. Did I mention filter words? I think that's another issue for another session because we're out of time right now. So thank you, Flamingos, for another great session on how do you make your settings real. And thank you, fellow writers, for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our podcast and learned something you can take away with you to help you in your writing journey. Please send us your questions about writing to flamingoswritenow@gmail.com. No caps, no spaces, and you might hear our responses to your questions on our Flamingos Right Now podcast. Join us next time when we discuss another great question, and we'll see you later.